Hi, friends around the world. Captain Behnam here. Today I have a special guest, someone that I have tremendous respect for, and recently did a video about my incident, United 1175, Peter Hornfield. Peter lives in Andorra, Spain. He's a captain with Ryanair, over 10,000 hours of flight time. He started, I think, his aviation career around age 14, and at age 25, he became a captain. And he's married. He has two beautiful kids. And of course, most of you or all of you know him as the Mentour Pilot. He started um, a phenomenal channel, Mentor Pilot, that has been viewed by more than 500 million people, and he has over 2 million subscribers. It's an honor to have you here, Peter. I always wanted to get a chance to meet with you in person, and maybe that will happen because my sister lives in Barcelona. So hopefully next time I come around, I'll take a trip to Andorra so that we can meet in person. Um, this podcast, as you know, it's is going to be focusing on aviation icons such as yourself and people who have done tremendous things in life and who have contributed not only to their own family and community but to the world. You're running a YouTube channel with over 2 million subscribers, Peter, and being a professional pilot. Can you tell me a little bit about it? How did you get started? Why Mentor Pilot?
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, thank you very much for inviting me. It's an honor to be here. It's talking to fellow aviators is one of my favorite things to do. So thanks again for inviting me.
Absolutely.
I mean, Mentor Pilot it's gone through stages, as anything does when you're creating something that you love, right? It'll change from one thing to the other. When it started off, I started it really because every 5 years or so, I kind of need a new personal challenge. I need to do something new. And in aviation, as you know, in the beginning, as you start, there's new challenges all the time. You go from a cadet to first officer to senior first officer to potentially captain, and then maybe a trainer, an examiner, and so on. And I had kind of done all of those things around 2015. And I have a little bit of an entrepreneurial streak in me. So I wanted to try to create something that wasn't directly connected to the airline that I work for. And I realized that social media was going to be huge. Like, there was no question about that in 2015. And also, I knew nothing about it. Nothing. And the only way to really learn something is to immerse yourself in it and actually do it yourself. You'll notice that with the podcast that you just become better and better for each episode you do. And the same goes for anything you do, really. So I thought, right. Well, actually, I didn't think. My wife said, listen, you're home way too much. You need a hobby. Why don't you start a YouTube channel? Because you like the sound of your own voice. So it's perfect. So that's what I did. I started Mentor Pilot really because I saw that there was a gap in the information market around pilots, where if in 2015, remember how it was in 2015? If you got out on the internet and tried to find any information about how it was to be working as a pilot,
yes,
you ended up in one like Peep Rule on those rumors forums,
right.
And everyone was just complaining about it because the happy pilots, they were out kite surfing or chilling with their friends or doing something cool, and unhappy pilots ended up on the internet. So so you just found yourself basically, if you were like me and you loved aviation and you went out, if you were a young person and you wanted to get into the occupation, you went out on the internet and you found that people hated it, which to me was really weird because I loved working as a pilot, right? I loved not everything, but as a whole, working as a pilot is awesome. So I thought, well, I can go out and I can speak about my experience, what I think about piloting and what I think about the occupation, what the pros and cons are. And I have the right to do that because I have, at that point, I had like 7,000 or 8,000 hours and I was a type rating examiner. So I could speak about it with some authority. So that's what I did. In the beginning, it was all about just informing people who were on their way into the industry about what they could expect. But obviously, as the channel grew, that then changed.
Yeah, it's so interesting you say that, because some people on the outside look at us, what we do for a living, and they think is beyond their reach. They can't do it. And because, who do you normally go to get advice from initially when you want to do something? Friends and family, right? And if they're not in aviation, it makes it very challenging. In a couple of episodes that I have done that is going to come out, I'm going to tell people about me. People call me a legend. You call me Captain Behnam. Saved 381 lives and just got the celebrity status. However, I'm that little boy that was born in a village with a big dream. The most important thing, in my opinion, is the how and the why. If your why is big enough, the how will show itself.
Yeah.
And a lot of people don't know how to do it. And people like you, like myself, guiding them, telling them exactly the steps we took, what we did, is really, really important. The information you're putting out there is extremely, extremely valuable. The other question I had for you is that you and I have spent a lot of time breaking down very complex aviation situation, whether it's passengers or pilots or millions of other people watching online. I had my date with destiny at 36,000 feet between San Francisco and Honolulu. It seems like everything I did in life prepared me for that moment. And as unfortunately, some pilots did not have the outcome that I did. And, you perfectly show that in your videos. And I wanted to know that when was it the first time you realized that aviation education outside the cockpit was going to be such a big part of your career?
So, like I said, when I started the channel, that was in 2015. I'd already been working for 15 years as a pilot then, and up until that point, that had never even crossed my mind that I would do anything else. But I did have that entrepreneurial streak. I wanted to try something, and I did feel like, there's probably a little bit more that I can do than what I'm doing at the moment. Now, when you start a YouTube channel, there's going to be like 5 people watching you, right? And that's going to be 10. And then after a few weeks or months, if you're good at it, it might be 1,000. But it goes very slowly to grow, right? In the beginning, you never think that you are going to be able to sustain yourself doing this. It cannot even be the goal. I think a lot of people today want to become YouTubers. So they think that you start up and then you become famous and you start earning a lot of money. That's not how it is.
No.
You have to start with something you love. And you have to start by giving much more from yourself than what you think that you're going to get back, right? And as long as you keep doing that, as long as the audience feel that this person is actually giving me value for my time, then you will succeed. You will continue to grow. It's the same as what we talked about before about becoming a pilot. It has a lot to do with endurance, with staying on there. You're going to come up against obstacles, but if you let the obstacles stop you, well, then nothing will happen. But if you climb over the obstacles and you keep working on it, then you will eventually succeed. And in my case, when I had started to get maybe 100,000 subscribers and the videos were starting to get in the tens and even sometimes hundreds of thousands of views, I realized that there's something here. There is a kernel of something here that maybe could be similar to the role that I had as a line training captain and as a type rating instructor and examiner. But I have to be very clear here. Like the first couple of years, I would earn the equivalent of a cup of coffee of YouTube. It was not something that you could sustain yourself on. I did it because of passion and because I love what I was doing.
Right. And being an educator is extremely, extremely important. With both you and I have flown in many different parts of the world, being based in Europe, which is phenomenal. I mean, 30, 40 minutes flight, you're in a different country, a different culture, different people. I have flown over 13 million miles or to 44 different countries. And, as you go through the airports, whether there's a little nod with another pilot or, waiting in line at the customs and talking to them, I wanted to know what your thoughts are as far as the biggest differences in airline culture, training, and safety between Europe, US, and other parts of the world. Because I have seen a tremendous differences, especially when it comes to CLR, Command Leadership Resource Management. And so I wanted to get your input on that. So, what are your thoughts?
So, first of all, I'm going to be clear that I haven't operated out of the US much. I've basically done one flight of the US, and that was when I picked up a 737 from Seattle and flew it back to Ireland.
Okay. Was a brand new airplane for Boeing? Is that what it was? Yep. Yeah. I've done that. Screen. Isn't that fun? Isn't that fun? I picked up two 757s for United, and they had the covers on the seat. So you walk in, it's a brand new, I don't know, at that time it was like $75, $80 million airplane 30 years ago. And you take the covers off the seat, the plastic, and you're the first one sitting on that airplane. At the first takeoff, you're literally a test pilot.
And says, well, I mean, we had a huge test team that were testing all of the airplane out before me, so I wouldn't be the first one to sit there. But the feeling of picking up something brand new that smells like a new car when you take it away, and the registration paper punch with you to bring with you, and they cater it up fully just for you and the other person that's going to fly with you.
Oh yeah, I got a bomber jacket, I got a hat, a lunchbox. It was really cool.
It was
the only thing I wish I could do was fly at 500 feet VFR over the coast in California, which I was not allowed to do that.
Well, I did when we did it. Remember, well, this must have been back in 2017 or something. There was a lot of forest fires over Canada. And we flew out in the evening, US time, and flew up over Canada, obviously over Greenland, because we didn't use the shorter routes. We used something called routes.
Right.
But I remember that it was beautiful. Anyway, to get back to your question, there are definitely differences between the US and Europe, and I know about them because I do a lot of research for my video.
Well, yeah, just tell me all the differences you see within the European airlines, and where you see the differences, the type of training you've done, and the people in Europe.
Yeah, so it seems to be the US definitely has more hands-on when it comes to initial training, at least. It feels like it's more old school. It's more like stick and rudder training, while Europe has kind of taken the step to like we train airline pilots. So if you are going to become an airline pilot, you go into one of these integrated schools, and they will teach you how to be a good airline pilot, right? They won't teach you how to become a GA pilot and then eventually an airline pilot, because in Europe you can start flying in the right seat when you have 200 hours, right? Which in the US is unthinkable because you have the 1,500-hour rule. So there's definitely
and when I got hired, I had over 4,000 hours on ATP when I got hired with United. Yeah, so
it's interesting. Did you then go through the regionals before you got into United, or did you do something else?
No, just the regionals. Yeah, the charter pilot, flying canceled checks, the freight, and just like you said, we started the general GA and or general aviation, I should say, for the viewers, and then build your time up, corporate jobs, and the commuter build up flight time. Go from single engine to twin engine to turboprops to a jet, and at that time, United would hire.
Now there is some benefits to building up experience for sure, but we're seeing what I have seen is that my airline, especially take on a lot of cadets, right? And they have an extremely robust training program, which starts with obvious selection. Like you make sure that you get the cadets that are coming in are properly tested and vetted so that you get the best material. And then you have an extremely robust training path that you go through, including, so they have selected flight schools that they control the quality of, making sure that the quality of it is good, the training they get initially, and then they get going through the type rating program of the airline to make sure that when they come out, even though they have 250, 300 hours when they start, they're extremely well prepared for what they are supposed to do. And then they spend a lot of time flying with line training captains, senior captains like myself, before they are released onto the line. And we've seen tremendous success with that. A lot of them obviously end up in tricky situations, even during the beginning. But because the standard operating procedures are so robust and training has been so well thought out, it actually works really, really well.
Mm-hmm.
Now, obviously, after the Colgan Air accident in the US, the 1,500-hour rule was implemented there. And I personally don't like it. I think it's problematic that you force people to go through hoops. The 1,500 hours is a lot of time to get if you don't get paid for doing it. Like if you don't end up flying, crop dusting or whatever. And even if you do, you're doing a completely different type of flying than what you are going to do in the airline seat. So I am personally a favor of looking at the training, making sure that the training organizations that people go through is as robust as possible, but not putting a roof on like, okay, you need 1,500 hours, no matter how good you are, no matter how much training you've gone through. So that's one of the things that I've been pushing myself.
Yeah. After how many hours, if somebody's over 250 or 300 hours on the right seat, when they make captain, how many hours do they have, or is it depends totally on the growth of the airline, how fast the airline is growing?
So first of all, is the growth of the airline, the need for the captains, obviously. The minimum in our airline is 3,000 hours, but generally people have significantly more than that before they become captains. And again, that's after a very staunch selection process and checking process, and then training, and then checking again, and then they become captains. But yeah, 3,000 hours you could potentially have.
Yeah. I was thinking about the first question I asked you. You said every 5 years you have to set a new goal. Obviously Ryanair only has one type of airplane like Southwest, and you go to a 737 and that's it. Whereas at United, it was different. You start from a 727 flight engineer, and then a DC-10 flight engineer, then to a 747 flight engineer, and then to the right seat. On the smallest airplane, we have 7273, then 7576 to 747. And then at that time, you go back to 737 as a captain, and you work your way up. There used to be a time, Peter, that it would take 19 years, 20 years for someone to make it to a 747 or the right seat of a 777. But now, because of the growth and because, the flight engineer has been eliminated for a number of years, is a two-man cockpit, people are getting hired right into the right seat of a 5776 and now even 777. They come to the right seat. But when I start talking to them, because, I was a Czech airman just like you, some of them have a lot of experience. They're coming from cargo airlines as a captain, or they flew for foreign airlines as a first officer on a heavy jet. So, when they come to United, they have the experience and come and work, the right seat. But obviously, after a few years, they make captain. Again, when they make captain is the smallest. Question I have for you is that you covered my flight, United 1175 incident on your channel. What stood out to you when you put that video together? What was there anything that changed your perspective of the event?
So when I started researching that, obviously the final report of that incident is very short. Like it doesn't, they give nothing of the emotional journey that you guys went through. They just basically said, okay, there was a catastrophic engine failure at this altitude, and the aircraft, the pilots got it under control, and they went down and landed. It's super, super short. And I'm used to covering some stories that are 160, 200, 250 pages with like intimate detail. I found that the final report was extremely, kind of lucky in getting the feeling for what actually happened. Because when I started researching, looking into it, and I realized the kind of like aerodynamic issues that the fact that the cowling disappeared, that caused over the wing, and these kind of things is what I feel is really interesting to explain to people. Like, it's not just an engine failure and then they got no control and landed. No, here you have an engine failure which causes some severe aerodynamical changes plus super, high vibrations, and the effect that has on someone that actually has to figure out what's going on with the aircraft. None of that was covered properly in the final report. So that was one thing. Now, when it came to actually how, why you guys ended up as in such a good place as you did end up, the teamwork stood out to me. Right? This is something that in incidents where things go right, it is very often the teamwork that is the main differentiating factor. So you guys were 3 in the cockpit, which I think was ultimately extremely important. And I don't know, you guys, I mean,
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, I always say the third pilot being in the cockpit really made the difference because as you said, the right wing was aerodynamically compromised. I mean, which airline pilot do you know that, on the top of descent, he's got max thrust on the good engine just to stabilize the rate of descent, simply because there was no airport, we were over the Pacific Ocean. And if you bring the power back and, lower the nose to have the speed for the airplane and the wing to be flyable, now you're coming at 33 to 4,000 feet a minute. And in 10 minutes, you'd be sea level. And I had 40 minutes to, and to make it. So again, all the knowledge that I had to bring into the picture. And of course, teamwork and setting the tone for the rest of the pilots. It was really, really important because the fact that we had 381 souls in the back that depended on us to land them safely, it puts a tremendous amount of pressure on you. That you're a promise keeper. You promise to take him from point A to point B safely, because in aviation, as you know, when you buy an airline ticket, there is no tangible. There's not a shirt you wear, or there's not a car you drive. You're just buying a promise that we take you from point A to point B and keep you safe. So
actually, it was interesting because I actually pointed out that because when I created the video and I had access to you, which is obviously a luxury when you create a video like this, and you explained how you became a little bit emotional as you were thinking about the people behind you. I pointed out in the video that this is something that I strongly suggest that you do not do, that you start thinking about them, because obviously the weight of having that many souls with their extended families and friends and stuff affecting thousands of people, tens of thousands of people, if you don't do it right, that emotional pressure that you put on yourself is high. And that can cause you to start spiraling and thinking, instead of being, all right, but this is I have to get myself and you guys down safely on the ground. And these guys are going to come around for the right, and they're going to be landing if we are safe, So this was one of the things that I pointed out in the video, that this is different than what normally we see. But in this case, it seems to have worked for Christopher and his crew.
Yeah. And, I remember that during the NTSB investigation, my crew members would tell the NTSB guy, the 2 things that stood in my head. One was that they told the NTSB gentleman that every 5 or 6 minutes, Captain Behnam would turn around and says, "Forget what just happened, focus going forward." So that actually became the theme for me for throughout all the training and everything that I did in the post-incident in my motivational and leadership seminars. Just focus forward and forget what happened, because, as pilots, just like you said, we could have something in our head that we keep thinking about it and spiral down and doesn't have a good outcome. And the other thing that really stood in my head or my mind, is that the NTSB gentleman said, "Captain, you have no idea what a pleasure it is to interview a live pilot rather than picking up the pieces from the bottom of the ocean, trying to put it back together to see what happened." As you know, there were many, many, many challenges in that. And the video, I highly recommend everybody go to Mentour Pilot, watch that United 1175 that Peter put together. He did a phenomenal job. And you kind of delivered it right on my birthday as I was retiring from United, which was a highlight.
Yeah, no, I knew that. I knew that you were retiring, which is needed to put it out around there. So
I'm very, very grateful for that video. My family, my mom, my kids absolutely love it. You built an empire, 2.15 to almost 2.2 million subscribers, nearly 500 million views. When you first started, Was there a moment that you thought that, wait, this is really going to become something really big?
No, when I started, you can imagine yourself, when someone who is in a semi-management position, which an examiner actually is, and I was a typewriting examiner, base typewriting examiner in my base where I work as well. To start off a YouTube channel where you don't know what you're doing, you don't have any graphics, you don't have any audio, everything is just you sitting like I am now, talking head sitting in front of a camera, right?
Right.
It's not something that is necessarily appreciated. So there was a lot of my colleagues or friends that would like, dude, what are you doing? Why would you? Why you have a great job in a great position? Why would you potentially jeopardize that by becoming a clown on the internet? So in the beginning, it was all about just because I felt that I had something. I felt that this is important. What I'm saying here holds water, even though I don't have any fancy graphics or even though I don't have any good sound design or anything. The information is good enough for people to watch it. So I'm going to continue doing that. And now it's basically, like I said, it was probably when I had 1,000, when I got my first silver button at 100,000 subscribers, then I kind of knew that, right, this is not just a fluke. It's not just something that is going to walk over. This could actually become something. And right now, like you said, I was working for Ryanair. I'm actually not at the moment. I took a leave of absence a year and a half ago, and I am not working as a pilot at the moment. This is my full-time job. And we are now a crew of about 10 to 15 people that are working on the videos on both channels. So it's not only Mentour Pilot, but Mentour Now. And Mentour Now it's got about 500,000 subscribers, but several million views per month. So they're much bigger than I ever thought would be possible. Yeah. And it is extremely satisfying because I can do things now that I never thought I would. I don't know if you saw the video that I released just last week about the load reduction device, the LRD on the 737 MAX or on the CFM LEAP engine.
I haven't seen that one yet.
No, it's basically it was a case where we have a system on board an aircraft, once again, that the pilots were not informed of. It is not in the manuals, right? When activated, it releases a lot of oil into the compressor stages of the engine upstream of where the air is taken for the cabin for pressurization, which means that if you have a bird strike and this LRD device activates, it fills either the cockpit or the cabin with acrid, dangerous, poisonous smoke.
Wow!
And this had been lifted up. About 2 years ago, we'd had 2 incidents of this happening, but the FAA has decided to not follow their own investigators' advice and actually put some guidance on how to deal with it. They didn't do anything. So I decided to create a video about it, highlighting the issue, saying this has already happened twice. And the fact that I'm in a position now where I can not only highlight that and get, hopefully, the aviation authorities to listen, but at least my pilot colleague talking about it all over the world is extremely gratifying because I know that I can make a difference now.
Exactly.
You never know.
Exactly. And maybe one day FAA and different authority just listen to your advice and other pilots and actually do something about it. That's one thing that's really interesting you say that, because when the blade came off my airplane, when it broke off, it was the first in the history of 777 that the engine would disintegrate and have a catastrophic failure like that. And of course, they fixed it, put the airplane back in the air, and that was the end of it. But nobody really went deep inside to figure out, even though investigation was done, even though they found out that there was a crack on the blade, was missed for a hairline paint, but nothing was done towards the other airplanes. Just they went through a very fast inspection, and that was it. But the second time when it happened, or out of Denver, now it's like, oh, let's put the brakes on. Somebody pushed that oh shit button, and this is bad. So they granted all the 777 with the engines around the world for almost 18 months. And then both Boeing's, Pratt's, they had to come in and change everything. So if something like that were to happen again, the cowling is not going to separate and create so much drag. Like in my airplane, people would say, "What do you mean by drag?" I say, imagine on the left-hand side, you're putting 90,000 pounds of thrust at full throttle, and on the right side, going at 600 miles an hour, you have a 4-story building that you're trying to pull through the air. You can imagine, what it does to the aerodynamics of that aircraft. You've covered countless accidents, safety procedures, and pilot insights. What is the one topic that always seems to grab people's attention when you put your videos out?
There's several things. Like my audience, like I said, the audience has shifted. When I started Mentor Pilot, it was about informing potential future colleagues about what they could expect. But now I am using incidents and accidents of Mentor Pilot in order to inform people about why things are happening, and also to give actual technical lessons. Technical lessons. If I would do a video about the hydraulic system on a Boeing 737, I wouldn't get many views. But when it's included in a storyline, something beginning, a middle, and an end, people do listen to it because all of a sudden it makes sense to them. So the technical part is something that I focus a lot on, and it seems to, with my audience, resonate because I'm getting a lot of feedback from people who are afraid of flying, who watch my videos. I don't know why they would click on it to start with, but they watch the videos and they feel better because they get everything explained.
Right.
They all of a sudden, it's not just an aircraft that flies and then it falls down and everyone dies. No, there's a long chain of events that causes this accident. Something that where you can see that this was like the massive amount of different things that had to happen in order for this ultimate potentially tragic outcome.
It's just like a chain reaction. It's not just one thing. I always tell people, like, for example, earthquake happens. Earthquake just happened in an instant, but a hurricane is different. A hurricane develops over Horn of Africa and it starts rolling towards the U.S. to the East Coast. I remember flying from the East Coast to Ghana, Africa, and I would see this little baby hurricane. They call it Susan or Helena or whatever, and I see it develop as I'm going back and forth within a month. It's getting bigger and bigger and bigger coming to South Florida. So it's coming. But for example, for an earthquake, it just boom, it just happens. People are just going about their thing. And aviation accidents is not like that. That's just something happens. Unless an aircraft gets shot out of the sky. Otherwise, the incidents are a chain of little events that, goes. And you remember that Eastern airline over Everglades, when there was a light in the cockpit and 3 pilots' attention was on that light and there was no GPWS, then, the autopilot gets disconnected. She goes into a shallow descent and crashes. Perfectly fine airplane because there were 3 heads just looking at one light and they lost the jet.
One of my favorite stories to illuminate that is the Tenerife disaster, right? With the 2 747s that crashed together in Tenerife.
Tenerife, yeah.
I started explaining that story, not like everyone started to explain that story from when they started lining up on the runway and one turns around and one taxis back. But the thing is, I started my story from back when the Pan Am left the US and the fact that they were delayed and they had to pick up more passengers. And because they were delayed, they now started syncing up with the KLM flight in terms of time. And then they flew over towards the Canary Islands and there was a bomb threat in Las Palmas and they had to divert because of the bomb threat. And there was too little room on the apron and there was, they took time to fuel. You can see this, like there's an enormous amount of things that had to happen exactly the way that it happened for those 2 aircraft to end up crashing into each other on the runway. And everyone blames this Van Zanten, the captain on the KLM flight. But it's so much more than that, and it's so much more complicated. And you have to ask yourself, like, do you really think that this captain wanted this to happen or wanted even to risk this to happen? This senior line training captain that was in the KLM flight, what you think went through his head when he decided to start the takeoff roll, even though his colleagues was questioning the fact that if they had a takeoff chance or not. And you have to think of those things, because people, we have a tendency to try to find scapegoats. Like, it's this person's fault. That's why this happened. No, there's always a lot more circumstances to it. And I think this is what I'm trying to explain to people with my accident investigations, is that you have to think further. Nothing is really as easy as it seems. And that goes to, you can transgress that knowledge on to normal life as well. Because we do this all the time. You read a newspaper, you blame someone. Look what he or that organization did. No, yeah, it's much more complicated. We're living in a time now, unfortunately, where easy and quick truth are being forwarded from all directions.
Right.
And I'm trying to get people to understand that actually everything is much more complicated than you think it is, and you have to have knowledge in order to understand that.
Right. It's so interesting you say that, because sometimes, obviously we have senses, whether it's smell, sight, hearing, but there's also that sense inside, I call it your gut feeling, your intuition, or it's something that you think it might not be right. How many times, some of the airports we have in the U.S., whether it's Chicago or San Francisco, sometimes there are 3,000 takeoff and landings per day. People don't understand that, and when an incident happens, obviously is an aviation, it's covered everywhere. I mean, there are more people dying riding motorcycle a year, more people dying driving a car in accidents. But when it happens with an airplane involved, it takes a global view, and everybody basically in the world hear about it. So many times, like, we're holding short of the runway, and the ATC is trying to squeeze us between an airplane just touched down, an airplane, a short fine answers, expedite, clear for takeoff. And, if I'm, flying, it just or the co-pilot just say, unable. That's it. Because my gut feeling's telling me by doing that, things going to be out of SOP, out of normal. I might miss something, those 4 or 5 items that we have to set. And you've seen how many close calls as an aircraft crossing a runway and the other one takes off. I'm not going to mention the airline's name, but you've done it in your videos. It's just like they cleared each other by 75 feet. And, that's it. It's the end of the story. But if that accident were to happen, it's huge. Like out of San Francisco, when you take off the runway 28 right, very populated area to your right, Daly City and then San Francisco. We almost lost a 747, which veered off towards the mountains and cleared the mountains by 75 feet.
Yeah, I know.
Fully loaded 747 with over 150,000 pounds of fuel. And people say, oh my God, if that accident happened, let's say there were 400 people on board, right, would die. I said, no, there'd be thousands of people on the ground that would perish, because now you have a projectile that is basically like an atomic bomb is going to hit the ground with 150,000 gallons of fuel, and that is not a good sight.
I have looked so much for any reports on that, but it's really, really hard to find. I just found like newspaper clippings, and there is an interview with two of the pilots that are official, but it's super hard to find. Anyway, it's interesting to hear you say that thing about the feeling, the gut feeling, that you feel in kind of like in your guts when something is wrong or not right. This is also something I'm trying to get people to understand, is that gut feeling comes from years of experience and training.
Yeah.
Like you can't put your finger on it. This happens often when you do setups, for example, or something that's like, something is off. I don't know what it is, but something is off. And when you have that feeling, it's always something off. There's a switch that is the way it, has been moved from where it was before. There's a value in one of the dials that is just slightly askew of what you are used. But that thing, and that's why we need 2 pilots. This is why we need to keep the pilots on board, because you cannot quantify that feeling, right?
Yeah.
It's there, and it's thousands of incidents every single year that you never ever hear about, because a pilot, like Christopher here, has been sitting there. It's like, no, let's just wait. And nothing happens. That never happened. That never hits the newspapers, but it's there. And what people don't understand is just like what you say, thousands and thousands, millions of flights every single day all over the world are being safely operated because people have a lot of training, a lot of experience, work together as a team, and make sure that it doesn't happen.
Exactly. And listen to that gut feeling, that 1 second or 2 seconds of delay, it could change the outcome. Just like what happened just a couple of weeks ago in Washington, D.C., when the helicopter hit a commercial jetliner. And like people say, well, why didn't the commercial jetliner veer off? But I say they're in controlled airspace. They're 400 feet, from landing. The whole focus is on that runway. That thing is moving fast. And when the other aircraft was told, maintain visual contact, I mean, you got to trust some of these things. And there has been times like coming to San Francisco, we do 2 parallel approaches, runway 28 right and 28 left. There was a time that you would do wingtip approaches. I mean, I remember when I was flying the 747, we came, from Tokyo on the left runway, and somebody's coming from the right, and we just landed 2 wingtip, adjusted the speed, so we both came down and landed and touched down at the same time. The nose came down. It's a beautiful thing, but it's not very safe.
It is though. I mean, they've done the risk assessments on that. They know that, in case you both go around, you turn each one left or right. Or
one left and right, yeah. But now they scattered them, just like the one is, a couple of miles ahead of the other one. And then they have the TCAS, the RA, and the TA. So if it gets too close to veer off, but sometimes we are told that to turn the transponder from RA to TA, because otherwise it's going to give you warnings to a point that, I mean, even the procedure says turn it off, because otherwise it would be very distracting. It's telling you one thing to do, and you're deliberately gonna not do it, and that is not a good thing.
No,
That is not a good thing. But again, going to back that gut feeling and the sense that you get that something is wrong, I highly recommend all the aviators to listen to it. And I also wanted to emphasize on word aviator and pilot. In the US, we have different type of pilot. It's not just an aviation pilot. The guy who's running the barge down the Mississippi River, pushing another boat, he's a pilot. And, the cruise ships that come in, they get guided by pilot boats, tugboats, and those pilots bring him in. So I tell people, the professional aviators, I call them, there's a difference between a pilot and an aviator. The pilot is the guy that pushes the barge down the Mississippi River, but the aviator is the one that commands that jetliner. And, we do it so easily, time after time after time after time, safely. And God forbid, when things go wrong, like what we just talked about, is not just one thing that's going to happen. Unless the poor thing is being shot out of the sky, it's just like multiple things happens. You might have to go to day before, like in a Pan Am case. You have to go back to where it actually start taking off, because all the sequence of event that came to create that horrible, horrible collision and accident.
Yeah, and it's like you said, often what I've found, having researched hundreds and hundreds of accident reports now and done equally hundreds of videos about it, is that there's a couple of kind of precursors that you find to the ones that go really badly, especially when they're pilot induced, and it has to do with pushing yourself in where you shouldn't. As in, like, taking that shortcut when you feel like I'm not sure I'm going to take it, but I'll I've just got the shortcut, so I'll take it, or not taking that extra turn in the hold to prepare for the approach. Those things, it's just one thing that I would love for other aviators out there to do. It's just take that extra time. Just take that extra vector. You're going to kiss my traffic controller. If someone is going to yell at you, doesn't matter. You save so many gray hairs from by just take those 2 extra minutes or 2.5 extra minutes it'll take you. It doesn't matter.
That is so important.
way, you know?
Yeah, that is so important. Take that few extra seconds. I always tell people when I do that and somebody said, why? I said, well, I want to live another day so I can tell the story to my grandchildren, not read it on CNN, newspaper or watch on CNN that something horrible happened. The other question I have for you is, where do you see the Mentor Pilot going in the next 5 years? More in-depth contents, new platforms, or maybe even a book? Where do you see that going?
Yeah, so I'm constantly looking at ways to improve the content for my viewers, right? You always have to be a viewer centric when you're working with social media. So you should ask yourself for every new venture, like, okay, is this going to add value to the people who are following me?
Mm-hmm.
What I would like to do, obviously, fortunately, we're going to run out of accidents eventually because they just don't
I
happen.
hope so. I don't want you to be out of business, but I hope so.
No, but that's what I'm hoping for as well. Now, incidents always happen. So incidents I will continue to do, and we will always be able to learn from them. So incidents will continue. Accidents will taper out. Now, what I'm probably going to do is the format that I'm using to explain these kind of things. That's in the format of an accident report, which is explaining when it happened, why it happened, who was involved, all of the technical systems that were involved, and then the story arc of what actually happened. That can actually be applied to many, many different things. It doesn't have to be aviation, right? So I'm hoping to be able to either pivot Mentor Pilot eventually over to cover other types of incidents and accidents as well, maybe with another presenter that have more subject matter expertise in those areas, or create a completely new channel that will do that, but following the ethos of Mentor Pilot, actually explaining very complicated things in ways that people without technical training can understand. So this is one thing. Otherwise, we are starting a podcast as well. Me and a friend of mine, similar to what you're doing. We haven't decided on the name yet, but it's probably going to be touch and go. We'll see.
Oh,
But
that's good.
yeah. So he's also a fellow 737 pilot, very similar background to me. But we have a great banter going. So we would like to do that about current events in a less scripted format, where kind of like what you and I are doing now. We'll discuss something happening. So what do you think of that? Well, I see this, you see that. Excellent. And bring it forward. What I do on Mentor Pilot now is very scripted and very researched. So what you're getting is the facts as far as we know them. But
you do a phenomenal job on that. Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome.
Good. So that's what I'm seeing. Like in 5 years, it's probably going to be even more type of content, as long as I feel that I can actually give some content or value to the people that are watching.
Well, obviously, doing this full time now, taking a leave of absence allows you to spend more time with the family and the kids and watching them grow. That is really, really important. I mean, that is something that people don't get it. They look at you with your uniform and your big jet at the airport, but we do pay a price. We do pay a price. The family does pay a price. And I'm so happy for you that you're spending more time with the kids.
Yeah, no, it's priceless to be able to set your own hours. I mean, you know that, I know that. The fact that I know that I'm going to be off next Christmas. I know that I'll be able to be there for my kids' birthdays and for any practices that I might have. I can go skiing with them whenever I feel like, because we will be created, but on times where I have time to do that. But obviously, when you're on a roster, you're on a roster. You need to be in Honolulu. That's where you're going to be.
Exactly.
And this is where, when I started Mentor Pilot, that's what I started talking about. If you go back to the very first episode, I think it's called Life Quality of an Airline Pilot. And it's basically me talking about these things. Like, you're young, you're 18, you think that flying a shiny new 777 is the ultimate thing in life.
Yes.
And you're right. While you are 20, 23, this is probably the ultimate. But once you get a family and priorities are going to shift.
Sure.
So what was super cool in the beginning is not as super cool anymore. So you need to be aware of it and plan for it. What's kind of thing.
Yeah. One thing different between, our airlines is United being a global airline, from a small airplane flying in the U.S., which is a 73 or an Airbus, to 75, 76. They used to be domestic too. And, just going from one coast of the U.S. to the other side is almost 5-6 hours. And then you have the, 777 and the 747, which is retired. But the fact is that you keep looking forward to those airplanes. And the nature of the flying changes, the mission changes, and you're not gone as much as flying the 737 because you're not going to do 4 or 5 takeoff and landings a day and be dead tired with 10, 12 hours layover in a hotel room. You're going to Tokyo, you're going to Australia, you're going to New Zealand, you go to China, you come to Europe, and it's a 3 or 4 day trip. You spend 12, 14, 16 hours in the air, but you're back home in 4 days. But, talking about Christmas, stuff like that, 38 years with United, I think I had only 4 Christmases off. And that's a lot to be said about that. My kids are like, we celebrate all of these things, New Year's and Christmas, a couple of days before or after because Dad was never home. Yeah, I know exactly.
This is one of the reasons why I chose the airline that I worked for.
Yeah,
because they had there's a lot to be said about their commercial strategy, but they did have a very solid roster, working 5 on, 4 off all the time, right?
Yes.
Never, which meant that you could actually see in the beginning of
consistency. Yeah,
you knew exactly where you're going to be because it was 5-4 all the time. Earliest 1 week, late 1 week, and you always came back to base. We didn't have any late, so you were always home at night.
Right.
And that was as close to a 9-to-5 job as you can get in this industry. So a lot of people were asking me, you said 20 years with one employer. What? Why? Wouldn't you want to fly long haul or something? And yeah, professionally, I would have loved to do long haul, but personally, not really, because I saw I would have to pay if I were to do it.
Yeah, exactly. Well, you've covered a lot of well-known accidents, and there are there any lesser aviation stories that you think deserve a bigger spotlight?
What's yours? But no, I mean, they're all, I try to always find the incidents and accidents which highlight a specific problem that can be solved in a different way than it was, or that they solved in a very good way. So I often do cover I have a video coming up now in a few weeks, which is about an incident that no one has heard about in Finland, that no one died, no one was injured, nothing. But it's a super interesting case study in how things can go wrong and still go well,
Yeah.
And I love covering those because obviously, from an industry perspective, those are the ones that we learn from. Those are the ones that you and I read about. That there's a bulletin coming out saying that, dude, make sure that you press the toga button, so whatever it might be, and no one is hurt, but the industry has learned as much from that as it has from an accident.
Yes.
And this is why, this is another reason why the aviation industry is as extremely safe as it is that we keep reporting these things and learning from them.
Yeah.
And the fact that there is a no blame policy for reporting these kind of things is hugely important. I cannot overstress how that particular difference, that you feel like I made a mistake, I put my hand up, this is the mistake I made, and then the industry goes in and they don't pinpoint on you and fire you. They look at it like, why did this happen to this experienced person? There is something here. Let's see if we can find a way of solving this for the industry, not just for this particular dude.
Yeah.
That's why I love what I do, because it really is I feel that there's so many industries out there that could benefit from doing that are not. And that's just because they're not as safety critical as we are. The nuclear industry does what we do, right? So if you look at nuclear power plants, they have a very similar kind of framework of bow tie systems, safety management systems, and things like that. But if you look at the healthcare industry, interestingly enough, it doesn't exist in the same way. Even though it's
with us, because of the SOPs, because of the CLR, it's always whether it's physical or verbal or non-verbal, you're always passing a baton to the next group, next team. Everybody's doing the same thing. You talked about the health industry. There's so many deaths in hospitals because the doctors do not talk to each other. They don't have that CLR. So I think I've heard that there might be even adapting to what we have in the airlines to create that for themselves. So when a new doctor comes in, the other doctor knows exactly what was done. It seems like everybody's doing their own thing. Whereas with us is everybody doing the same thing over and over and over. And
Yeah, I
talking
mean,
about,
like I get contacted about that by anesthesiologists all the time, for example,
yeah,
because obviously they handle drug and anesthesia, and it's
right.
important that they get things right. So they are always like, how do you use the checklist? And do you it seems like they are really interested in trying to adapt it themselves, not from an
Yes.
organizational standpoint, but on an individual level. They're like, that thing that you said about communicating and talking to each other. That seems really interesting. Maybe we should start doing that.
Exactly. That communication that goes within the airline industry is extremely, extremely effective. I think other industries can use it. I'm talking about the incident, like my story, for example, and as I'm speaking more and doing seminars and leadership keynote speaker, which has become my thing to do, on top of the podcast and being a keynote speaker, I just did a keynote speech last April for General Electric with 20,000 in front of 20,000 people, and things are getting lined up. I got another one coming up in April, and the important thing, in my opinion, is that when you look at a story like that, like my story, now people are beginning to appreciate what we did to save 381 lives, because the last couple of months, hundreds of people have perished in aviation incidents. Now they're beginning to think, wow, this guy saved 381 lives and on an airplane that carries only 364, because the rest of them were children. Their souls on board, but they don't have any weight to take a seat and be on a manifest. Yeah, that is beginning to resonate with a lot of people, and they tell me that would have been the single worst aviation disaster. What happened to me, if he had crashed and killed people, would have been the single worst aviation disaster in U.S. history involving one airplane. There have been collisions between two airplanes that more people have died, but in one airplane, what we did to my team and I to save those people, that's pretty incredible. Have you had a moment in aviation where all your training and instincts were tested? Have you had a moment that everything that you have done was absolutely tested to the limit?
Oh, I'm fortunate to be among the pilots, the vast majority of pilots that have had obviously technical problems. I mean, they happen on almost a weekly basis, but nothing like what you experience, because obviously not only are our pilots well trained, our engineers are well trained, our aircraft are well maintained. So to have something catastrophic happening is extremely rare, like very, very. Pilots can go their entire career without ever having an engine failure in real life. Most pilots. So no, I have had incidents where my pulse have gone up, but nothing to that extent.
I've had hydraulic problems. I had electrical problems. We lost the IDG, which is generator on the 747, because the safety wire was not done after maintenance. Taking off from Los Angeles to Sydney, many years ago. Right about 200 feet, we lost one generator. About 500 feet, we lost another generator. If we got to 1,000 feet, we lost a third generator. Now we have a jumbo jet with only one engine with producing power for everything else. And sometimes I cannot understand or believe that some pilots, they have something like that happens and they keep continuing. We went over the ocean, dropped 100,000 pounds of fuel, came back and landed. But some people, something happens, some sort of an incident happens, and they continue to their destination. And this day of technology and everything getting reported to Boeing, to your company, to the, just I don't understand why did they take that risk and not go land. Say, you know what? Sorry, we screwed up. We said the altitude wrong, or this was wrong. We violated this, we violated that. But why continue? Or we overstress the airplane, go land. They're very, very fortunate that nothing worse happened when that airplane is at 36,000 feet.
Yeah, no, but I think once again, when you look at it, you are going to find out that that happened in very specific airlines where the culture might be different. So we're lucky having worked our entire career for airlines that support pilots' decision to just they feel like, no, I don't like this. I'm going to go back, and no one is going to say anything. But that's not always the case. So I don't think that any pilot would like, oh, I only have one remaining generator. Obviously the curator clearly says go back a lot.
Yes.
It makes it very easy. But I don't think that any pilot really would like to do that unless there's someone that's like peeking and like, Captain, they're gonna fire us if we don't do that. That's the only explanation I can come up with. And the only explanations I've seen as well when I've looked into incidents like that.
Yeah. Once I had a 3-star general that worked at the Pentagon sitting on the right seat. And the lesson I learned from that is how important respect and for the left seat guy is, because we are on the ground, we're getting ready to take off. There's a lot of things going on, too many moving parts. And I had to make a decision. So I turned around and told him, what do you think we should be doing? I said, well, you're the captain. Even though he's ranking-wise, when you're looking at a 3-star general from the Pentagon, a lot of experience, still yields to the open communication. You're the captain. What decision do you want to make? Let's talk about it. It's not like, I am saying this, I'm taking charge, and,
which is probably
let's do this.
Which is probably why he became a 3-star general, because he understood the training.
Openness is so important, Peter. That openness is so important.
Absolutely. We see that over and over. The more like hierarchical the cockpit gradient is, the steeper the cockpit gradient is, the bigger problems you get yourself into. And it goes, obviously, it goes down onto a company level, organizational level, but also on a personal level. Like you have to clearly show that to your colleagues that you are the type of leader that not only listens to your colleagues, but you're expecting them to tell you off if you do something, if you mistake.
Yeah.
You can imagine
that opening that door for open communication. Me asking him, what is your opinion? And he's saying, but you're the captain. What decision do you want to make? And then we collaborate, and together we make a decision. You know what? Let's go back to the gate. It doesn't feel right. Let's go back to the gate. And there have been cases I've gone to the gate for something that, by going back to the gate so the audience knows that we're getting ready, taxiing out for takeoff, something happens, and you're like, I think I have a perfectly fine airplane. But the fact that I think, that is important, because you're not confident that something else could go wrong. And there have been cases that we've gone back and they found something that we did not see with the naked eye. And then when that little light comes out in the cockpit, or that little warning you have, then you silence and say, I wonder why that happened. What could have caused that? Because it's always better to go to the gate. It's always better to be on the ground, wishing you were in the air and have this problem, right?
But this is also, it's also interesting, because this is obviously where being a captain becomes an issue. It becomes like, people look at it and they say, right, I want to be. It's pretty interesting when you look at first officers who want to become captains, right? I was in a position where I got to interview and check people that was on their way up to for the command upgrade, and you would find that less experience they had, the more willing they were to become captains, and the more experience they got, the more hesitant they were. So when you started asking someone with quite a lot of experience, like, so are you interested in going for command? And they're like, yeah, I am, but it seems hard. Then you know that they're ready, because now they're starting to understand the weight of the left seat. This 3-star general asked you, what's your decision here? Because that's your job to take that decision. If you go back,
you're the leader on the battlefield, and being a squadron commander and all of that. But
and it's like having an engine failure or having a problem, a light that goes on. Normally, from a decision-making point of view, it's pretty simple. Like, you have a QA checklist, you go through it. The checklist tells you that, providing that these systems are working, you can continue, or no, you need to go back. Simple, right?
Yeah.
it's the situations where no one has told you about that really, like, there is no right or wrong here, but you are going to have to make a decision. And those are the ones that are really tricky. And
Right.
I mean, I had a situation once where I was taxiing out. We were going down to Italy from Sweden somewhere, and we had the cabin crew called me up and said, "Captain, we have a 2-year-old that is climbing under the seats. Right, the cabin is not secure. We have 2-year-old that is just running around in the cabin and it's under the seats and crawling." Okay, obviously I'm not going to take off with that, so I was holding by the holding point, taking putting parking brake on, making a PA to the passenger saying that's really important that you follow my cabin crew's instructions.
Yeah.
You're safe. They called me up, said, "Okay, that's fine. It's in the seat now, so fine." I taxied up, lined up on the runway, ding from the cabin. No, it's out running again. So I taxi off the runway, off again, made another PA, and this went forth and back a couple of times, to the point where I had to ask my purser, like, "Listen, can you control this child? Like, how do you feel about this? Because obviously I'm not going to take off with this child in the central aisle. It's not going to happen.
Right.
Like, we're parents here." And she said, "No, actually, we get them seated, and then 2 seconds later, this child is out running again." At this point, I've started to use up so much fuel that I won't have enough fuel to go down and have my ultimate.
Exactly.
I need to go back to gate and refuel. So I'm talking to my first officer and the cabin crew, like, what are we going to do? Are we going to offload the 2-year-old here? Like, what's because this cannot continue. We cannot go and do circles around the airport with a 737 here.
Yeah.
So we decided, the cabin crew was not happy with the situation. The first officer backed me up and said, "Listen, we are going to have to say that this is an unaccompanied minor, because the guardian that is taking care of this child obviously is not taking care of the child, which means they're going to have to get off." So now I have to taxi back to gate, refuel, and not only that, I have to offload a 2-year-old and their guardian, right, in front of loads of Italian people that do not understand that position at all, right?
Right.
And these kind of situations, there's no manual for that, right? You're just going to have to make sure that you can actually motivate it when the time comes, because you are going to have to explain this decision to someone.
Yes.
And I had to eventually, and it turned out that yes, in this situation, it could legally be considered an unaccompanied minor. So it was fine from a legal perspective, but it was not something that I had read in any manual,
Exactly. Yeah. And if you took off and something happened, to that kid, that, that you be to blame. Somebody told me the 4 stripes. I don't know if you heard this or not. The captain has 4 stripes. The co-pilot has 3 stripes, right? So what does that 4 stripe mean? Some old captain, I used to fly with, it says, this is what it means. I take the blame. As a captain, the 4 stripes is I take the blame for whatever happens on that airplane, whether it's with the FAA, with the company, with the passengers, with the fueler, everything. People don't understand that you're really there, and whatever happens, they're going to look at the captain, the decisions he made for that incident.
Absolutely. You are, the buck stops with you. And another reason, another good example of that I always tell people when I do on training myself is that if you're in the right seat, you look over to the left for your support and what to do. If you're in the left seat, you look over to the left. The only thing you see is your own reflection.
Yes, exactly.
That is where the buck stops.
That's where the buck stops. Yeah. Other question I have for you: the commercial airline operation and the GA operation and incidents. What do you think is the biggest safety concern for pilots and the industry that should be focusing on?
Without a doubt, pilot mental health.
Oh,
without a single doubt in my mind. If you go back and look at lives lost over the last 20 years, and you look at all of the incidents where pilot mental health might have been a factor, you're going to find that could potentially be one of the biggest killers in commercial aviation at all. Because everything is becoming so well, like the technical status of our aircraft is so good, the training is so good, the safety systems we have are so good. So that when you look at pilot mental health, it is the one thing that is being pushed a little bit under the carpet. It's something that pilots are not really willing to talk about, and it's been stigmatized greatly. So it's one of those crusades that I push myself. It's like pilots need to be able to talk about when they're not feeling well, when they are under economical stress, or they've lost a spouse, or they've gone through a divorce, or something like that, and they don't feel like, actually, probably shouldn't be flying now. I should be focusing on myself and feeling better. There needs to be a completely bulletproof way of doing that, and then getting checked out and getting back into the cockpit, so that pilots feel that there is a way to do this, so they're not afraid of their job, losing their job, and the traveling public understands that pilots, just like any other human beings, will have these kind of episodes. Because if we don't, and pilots are considered to be these like super people that never have any problems like this. The only thing that we're doing is pushing it under the rug. And when you push something under the rug, eventually it's going to bite. Just like it did with the German wing disaster a few years ago. And there's plenty of other examples of that. I did a video on, remember there was a regional flight where one of a jump seating pilot suddenly reached up to full fire level.
And also the Egypt Air 767, where the captain was out of the cockpit, that's horrible. No, I agree with you. That is very important, that the fatigue thing that came up, that, like I'll be flying with the pilot and says, you know what, I'm fatigued. I'm been commuting, there's delay. Now we are delayed on the flight for 2 hours, 4 hours, 6 hours. Actually, this happened a few Christmases ago. And by the time the delays happened and the pilot had commuted from Seattle to San Fran, sat around for 4 hours. Now we're trying to go to Hawaii, and there's something wrong with deplaned the airplane. We get the other airplane going, and we're pushing right to the FAR limits for duty time. And he says, I don't feel safe to fly. And I said, I respect that. So fatigue, FAA understands that because of Colgan air crash, right? But what you're saying, people and pilots should feel safe and comfortable to be telling the other pilot or the company, for these reasons, I'm not mentally fit to fly that airplane. And
and it's just like when you're sick, you're not going to be flying, right?
Right.
This is absolutely the same, but for the mind. But it is so highly stigmatized throughout society. And obviously, anytime that something like this happens, like the German wing crash, for example, the flying public does not accept that.
Right.
You don't want to even think that thought that someone that's sitting in front might not be mentally well. So we have a huge problem here, but the problem will not get better unless it is being talked about and understood and destigmatized. So it's one of those things that, like, there's a lot of like very high hanging fruit when it comes to aviation safety, because it's already so good. But this is relatively low hanging fruit.
Right. I obviously have been asked to do a lot of interviews when an incident happened, and it's just really fresh, like the DC crash. Within 30 minutes, I got a call to do an interview, and you're like, wow. I don't personally know myself what has happened, but I can, depend on my professional experience, just putting things quickly together, watching the news a few times, and, coming up with ideas. And I've been right on. So my question to you is that the aviation media is growing, and trust is everything. How do you how Peter maintains credibility in a world where the information spreads so fast? Because within a day, hundreds of people are saying different things and blaming this or blaming that, but that that's not the case. And, I've been very, very fortunate that everything that I have said before it even hit the mainstream, it was right on. And so I can keep people trusting my judgment and the words I say. How does Peter do that?
Well, your guts here than me, because what I tend to do, because obviously media contacts me all the time when something happens. And I tell them the way it is, which is that I don't have enough information to give you anything. I can tell you from a general perspective how pilots operate, but I'm not going to discuss what the causes are to this because we don't know. And the risk of it actually aging like milk is pretty good. And the risk that you're actually saying something that is blatantly false is also pretty high. So I have built my brand on waiting, so that you'll notice that there are YouTube channels, even well-respected YouTube channels, friends of mine who are very quick on the ball to explain things. Normally, though, they tend to be also a little bit like, we don't know exactly what's going on here, but isn't this and this is possible? When I say something, it will be when the preliminary report is out, based, and then with a lot of other facts based in, so that people know that, okay, Petter is not going to say something now, but maybe in 3-4 weeks, he will say something. It's still not going to be, this is what happened. It's going to be, there are now a series of different possibilities here. Here is where we pilots work, how we do it. But these are the things that we know. And then in 2 years, there's going to be a Mentor Pilot video that says, this is what happened.
Yes. Okay. If there is an aviation lesson that should stay in every pilot's mind and the passenger mind, what would it be?
Yeah, take that extra time.
Take the extra time.
Takes extra time.
Listen to your gut feeling. If there's something you think is not right, it probably is not right.
Correct. Yeah, it's very simple, straightforward, and it goes pretty much for any walks of life. But it's important. It's super important, and it's one of those things that it sounds super easy to do, but actually it's pretty hard to comply with.
Yes, yeah, I agree with you. Well, I appreciate this conversation. It's been wonderful. I've been waiting for it for a long time to happen. Thank you so much to take time from the family and do this episode with me. In about a month or so, we will be posting this, and I'll make sure that you get the copy of the link, and would appreciate it that we can collaborate in the near future. If there is anything I can add to things, and I need you to get your opinion on, I'd really appreciate the openness to come back, and we'll talk. And
we're all in the same boat here. And since I'm starting up a podcast as well, you're next to be on that one. So it's going to happen.
That's awesome. Thank you so much, Peter. I really appreciate your time. This has been great. And I'm sure a lot of people are going to be very, very happy to see a different side of you in this podcast as they see you as a mentor pilot. Again, thank you so much. I appreciate you a whole bunch. And when I come to Spain, hopefully this summer, I rent a car and come to Andorra to see you and your beautiful family.
Awesome. I'm looking forward to it, Christoph.
Take care. So long. Bye.